Superman, a symbol of hope and justice. A simple and naive guy, raised by a pair of kind farmers in a small town in Kansas. A hero whose very essence is to be a ray of light in the darkest times. Or not. In 2013, I didn't have access to comic books or many other Western media, so Man of Steel essentially became my first introduction to Superman. But even back then, I felt there was something off about him, just as there was with Zack Snyder's vision of superheroes in general. Over time, I had more opportunities to dive deeper into Superman's mythology, and to explore the superhero genre as a whole. That's when I finally understood what was wrong with Henry Cavill's Superman. An important note, in this video, I won't be talking about the new Superman movie, at least not in detail, because I already have a review of that film which you can watch on my channel. Of course, since 1938 there have been countless interpretations, and it's impossible to recreate a single canonical image in a movie. There are simply too many stories, and every author brings their own inspiration and ideas. But if you put his alien origins at the center of the story, then he's no longer Superman. He's a super alien. Superman may have been born on Krypton, but his essence is Clark Kent, and that's exactly what's missing from Zack Snyder's Man of Steel. His Superman and his Clark Kent are practically the same person, whether in the cape or without it. We're looking at a 2-meter-tall space marine from Warhammer. His appearance and demeanor remain identical regardless of the costume. In other adaptations, he's a regular journalist, but when he puts on the cape, he becomes Superman. In Man of Steel, he's the same whether in costume or glasses. He constantly wears the kind of facial expression a 3-year-old has when they approach their parents to announce they've had an accident in their pants. He doesn't particularly trust people, creating the impression that he spent 30 years living on Krypton, instead of growing up on a Kansas farm. Put simply, his Superman is the typical Ryan Gosling meme type, a guy who prefers to use his fists rather than talk, which is strange, considering the speeches he gives in other adaptations. As I mentioned in my last video, Zack Snyder didn't understand what superheroes, especially Superman, were meant to be. Which is a shame, given the enthusiasm Henry Cavill brings to every franchise he's part of. Just look at how Superman changes throughout Snyder's trilogy. Let's start with Man of Steel. It was a spectacular blockbuster with stunning visuals, and an incredible score by Hans Zimmer, even with some questionable decisions. It's still a good film, so it's no surprise that any criticism of it can start a third world war on Twitter. As I mentioned before, this film was my first introduction to Superman. But if you strip away all the visual awesomeness, like anime-style fights, what we end up with is a fairly dull main character, with no real development over the course of the movie. Why does he defend Earth from Zod, if the film emphasizes that he's not human? By the way, fun fact, all of Zod's cruise pods look like. Well, I won't say the word on YouTube, but considering Kal-El was the first naturally born child on Krypton, we can assume natural reproduction was banned there, which means Krypton's architecture was built on incel ideology. Throughout his entire life on Earth, Henry Cavill's Superman never really learned to love humanity. The only thing that ties him to humanity is Lois Lane. She's literally the key, the only thing on Earth that has value to him. Without her, he turns into a Homelander on steroids from Batman's nightmare sequences. He has no friends, and people constantly mock him, manipulate him, or even beat him up. Instead of finding the good in people, Superman fully embraces his alien origins, especially once Zod shows up. And even after Zod's arrival, Superman still doesn't seem to care about humanity. Jumping over a fuel truck for aura farming seems more fun, apparently. Battles between superheroes in crowded places might look cooler, but Superman apparently agrees, since he drags Zod from a cornfield straight into the city. The climax is Zod's death. You can agree or disagree with Superman's actions here, but the problem is that after this scene, it has no real impact on him. just like in Transformers, where Optimus Prime rips villains apart and then gives a big speech over Linkin Park, with the American flag waving in the background. The sequel never came, but the character's story continued in the very strange Batman v Superman. Despite the title, Superman only has 43 lines. In the entire 3-hour film, Superman, just like in the previous movie, doesn't love humanity. He doesn't try to see the good in people. He never even attempts to communicate with the world. A conversation with Lois after his first heroic acts is the foundation of every Superman story. If he had done this, maybe the whole conflict with Batman, or Lex's fear that led him to create Doomsday, wouldn't have happened. But he doesn't care about humanity. He only cares about Lois, for whom he sacrifices himself, and dies in only the second movie of the cinematic universe. As I said in my previous video, this scene has no real weight, because we never had enough time to connect with the character, unlike in other stories where his death was truly impactful. Another odd thing, all the criticism against him instantly disappears. The government and the people mourn, building monuments, burying him as a national hero. The questions raised in the film remain unanswered, even in Justice League. I love this movie, and it's probably the best in Snyder's trilogy, but the fact that it drops the earlier moral questions is honestly strange. The question of whether Superman should exist is left unanswered. I don't see the point in going over the whole Joss Whedon vs. Zack Snyder cut saga, since half the internet has already done that, and I mentioned it in my last video. Anyway, the topic of this video is Superman, and even though we don't get much of him here, at last we see that Superman. Not just the guy in tights, but the ideal we should strive for. After Justice League, that's exactly when we should have gotten a Man of Steel sequel. But I've already talked about the studio madness before. The behind-the-scenes Game of Thrones between Warner Bros. And Henry Cavill was never fully revealed, but in the end, we never got a continuation of his story. Only in 2022, with the release of Black Adam, did we get a hint at Superman's return. But The Rock couldn't manage to strike a proper deal with the studio or with Cavill. In December 2022, James Gunn announced a reboot of the DC Cinematic Universe with a new cast. Whether this was the right decision, you can find out in the first video on my channel. Cavill wanted to show Superman as a human, not an alien. He wanted to show his emotions, instead of endless aura farming. Across 3 movies, we got a lot of spectacular action scenes. But was that really the most important thing? The world needs a real Superman, not a foreign alien who could destroy us at any moment, but a kind friend who will always support you in hard times. Zack Snyder tried to become the next Christopher Nolan with his reimagining of The Dark Knight, but in the process, he stripped Superman of the most important thing, empathy and humanity. Superman doesn't need to be reimagined. Goodness has always existed and always will exist in our world, and most other Superman writers understand that. The only real victim in all of this is Henry Cavill himself. He's a victim of circumstances he didn't deserve. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. And with that, I'll see you in the next video.
There's a starman waiting in the sky. He'd like to come and meet us, but he thinks he'd blow our minds. There's a starman waiting in the sky. He's told us not to blow it, 'cause he knows it's all worthwhile. He told me, let the children use it, let the children use it, let all the children boogie.